Have you checked the children?
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes that is better.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Horror Show. I'm Cecil Laird.
Fuego here.
And we had to gather remotely to jump right on top of this review. Not necessarily because it's a movie you guys have to rush out and see, but because it's a movie we rushed out and saw. And I gotta be honest, I feel a little bit bad for telling Fuego to jump on this because I had heard so many positive things already. And it's not that it's not a good movie, but it's, you know, it's about 20 minutes too long in my opinion, but we'll get into everything. But it was a refreshing difference from the usual fare of the same title. And so, guys, what we're going to be talking about today is the 2021 reboot called Wrong Turn. Now, as I was doing a little bit of research, getting some graphics for this particular review, this movie was originally called Wrong Turn Foundation. I don't know that it was actually originally supposed to be a full-on reboot, but I feel like they held it back and kind of were like, you know what, let's just rebrand it. Because there are some posters that you can look for and see Wrong Turn Foundation on it. So I that's how it started, and it became this. And I will say that I definitely enjoyed it more than some of the Wrong Turn installments. It is not, outside of being in the woods, it is not a whole lot like the originals. I mean, there's some similarities, but it's not the same storyline. And I will say that it is definitely a more competently made movie than a lot of the Wrong Turn sequels ended up being. However, ultimately, I don't know that I personally enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed a lot of those schlocky movies for various reasons that I'll get into throughout the review. It was a well enough made movie, but it was too long and not interesting enough for me at parts. Fuego, I'm very curious about your thoughts because I have no inkling anyway.
I'm really shocked because you said something in our group thread when I was driving home about best in something. I don't know. Maybe you were talking about the best of these films.
No, I immediately followed that with not really.
Oh, okay. Okay, I didn't see that part. Okay, so for overall thoughts, what I will say is I don't even think I got past the second one, the one that I think Joe Lynch did it. I think it was the one with Henry Rollins. That was the second one, right? Mm-hmm, that was the last one I watched. This is not a series I ever gave much of a crap about. I thought the original with Eliza Dushku in it was decent, you know, but this is not a series that I've stuck with or followed or whatever. But I was hating this movie for the first like 30, 40 minutes or so. And then I know we did a trailer reaction to it. I didn't remember much at all about that. So I was pretty much going in blind and just remembering the fact that this was just kind of a full-on soft reboot of sorts. And when it switches gears and kind of finds its groove as to what it's actually doing, when it's not a super twist sort of bit, but once they start to pull the curtain back a little bit, I feel like the movie finds its groove, and I really quite enjoyed the second and the third act of this movie. And I felt like, despite a lot of characters in it I didn't like, most of those characters don't really stick around for very long. And then we have a very solid, competent final girl, and I feel like her arc is interesting. Matthew Modine, but for what he gets to do, is good, despite some of the plot illogicalities, which we'll get to. But yeah, I ended up liking this a lot more than I was anticipating. And for a one night only, there's a lot of people in the theater I was at. Granted, everybody was spaced away from one another, and you know, I saw them cleaning the theater right when I was arriving, and so I mean, I feel pretty okay about being in the theater with everybody masked up. So I was kind of resistant to go and see this when you and I talked earlier today, and now I'm actually glad that I did. So
that's good. I'm actually glad for that. I was worried because I was like, well, he's gonna be like, there was a reason I wasn't excited to go see this, but I'm glad it actually seems like you might have enjoyed it a bit more than me then. So here's the thing. It's well, okay, let's get into the actual story of it all. Okay, so it starts off with Matthew Modine as he is on the search for his missing daughter. She's been missing for a few weeks, and he has no idea what's going on. All he knows is that she and her friends were off going to try and hike the Appalachian Trail. And the last contact he had was from this particular town. And then it flashes back 3 weeks, and we see the 6 friends as they go on this trip. And at first they stop in this little town where it's a very, good old boy southern town that is not very forward thinking. And this is, of course, it's 2021, so any horror movie that comes out in 2020 or 2021 has to have the most PC cast that you possibly can, right? So you've got the gay couple, you've got the interracial couple, exactly, thank you, and then the typical white couple. Which were the least likable of the 3 couples in my opinion. Of course, we're terrible. Yeah. But anyway, so, of course, they catch all the side glances of everyone in a particular restaurant bar, which, I gotta be honest, I will say that one of the positives for me, and speaking of story, is the fact that the upsettingly typical town folk in the bar that are like giving them trouble, that part of the plot didn't play out the way it always plays out in every single horror movie ever. And without spoiling it, I thought that was a good just turn of events. Wrong turn. Not the turn I was anticipating, and I thought that was actually a good nod. I agree. Okay, cool. So we're on that same page. So they go off, and basically they're warned by one particular person, stick to the trail. Don't go off the trail. And of course, what happens? They go off the trail, and they run afoul of a loose log, a tree that has been chopped and thrown down a hill at them, which you see in the trailer, which caught our attention very much. And it basically shakes up the group a tremendous amount. And they run afoul of these people in, garb that is very pagan looking, right? Very demonic almost, because they're wearing animal skulls on their heads and talking in weird language and all this stuff. But not everything is quite what it seems. That's the theme for this movie, I think, is not everything is quite what it seems. And that's how they continue to subvert expectations throughout the movie. So even though overall I wasn't as pleased with this movie as I was hoping it would be, I will say that there were aspects of it that I did appreciate, including its ability to subvert expectations. And so it's the, downturn of this group of 6 as they run afoul of this group of people living on this mountain. And then the back, third of the movie is the Matthew Modine trying to track down his daughter and her friends part of the story. Without going into any further in the story, without spoiling it, I will say that I appreciated the structure of the story, but again, I maintain that it was about 20 minutes too long. This movie was about an hour and 50 minutes, and it could very easily have been an hour and a half and still been as strong, in my opinion. But at least the story didn't play out the way every one of these horror movies tends to play out nowadays. Fuego, that's what I totally appreciated about it. And I think maybe with this being a little more elevated than some of the previous installments is the fact that, as I was looking at the IMDb, this is the first time Alan B. McElroy has actually written a wrong turn script since the first one, because he was the one who wrote the first one, created the characters. He also was the screenplay person for the 4th Halloween movie. And he actually also did Todd McFarlane's animated Spawn for HBO. He wrote those. Get out of town. Yeah. I had no idea. Respect. Delving into this guy's
IMDb. And then from a directorial standpoint, we'll get into it, but Mike P. Nelson was the guy who did The Domestics a couple of years ago.
That was
Kate Foster,
very entertaining.
Which I liked that one too. So I can see.
I think we did a review of that on the channel, right?
I believe we did, or at least if we didn't, we should have, because we both liked it.
Yeah.
I felt like some of that structuring that you were mentioning, though, with the jumping back and forth, it dragged the pace down for me. And there's also, while I liked some of the twists and stuff, there was also a lot of stuff I saw a mile away, one thing in particular with a little girl, and also just some of the just sheer stupidity, without spoiling. There is one bit where somebody is taking a character through the woods that is an experienced hunter, knows about the traps, knows all this different stuff. Something happens to that person, and then the person who's never been there before somehow makes their way through the woods and gets there very quickly and conveniently to said destination. And it was almost like facepalm. I'm like, I know Ryan George isn't going to do a pitch meeting about a movie like this, but if he did, dude, he could skewer so many of the conveniences in this and so much of the predictability. So there's a lot of good ideas in this movie, though, and especially with what happens to certain people that are taken by this group that aren't killed. I thought that stuff was really cool. But again, there's good ideas in this movie. I'll give it that, and that's where I was entertained.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but even story-wise, again, they subvert expectations. So something happens, and there is a death on the opposite side, and you're like feeling completely justified in it. But then when the story continues, and then people are held accountable, you're like, well, damn, actually, okay. I mean, it's weird how they were doing it, but if that was actually their goal, then yeah, they kind of have, like, it's really interesting at times where you're like, wow, okay, so there's kind of, they kind of did do that, like, you know what I mean? So it made it a more interesting watch, as opposed to people just being completely innocent and
the whole
tortured.
Moral quandary.
Exactly. No, there is some gray area involved, and at which point it's a little bit easier to, give yourself over to what happens. Although I will say that while they didn't shy away from gore at times, this is definitely an R-rated film. I think we were a little too obsessed with a cranial destruction, whereas we could have gotten a bit more out of that box. You know what I mean? Yeah, there is a bit with a spike pit, which we saw in The Hunt last year, and and lots of just stabby, but with like in dimly lit sort of situations. If we're continuing with like gore and practical and stuff like that, it's really some people who have had their eyes like singed away and who are thrown in these like underground areas. I thought that was cool. Yeah, honestly. No, there's a lot of good practical effects and a lot of good gore for sure in this movie. The effects were definitely a highlight.
Yeah, and I like the cinematography a lot too. That's where I can tell that this was from the guy who made The Domestics, because it had like a very sweeping grittiness to it, and the set design was great. I love the costuming. The skulls and the weird suits and everything. I love
the combination of the skulls. It's almost like they cobbled together. For one mask, it's almost like they cobbled together a bigger animal out of smaller animal skulls, even though that it was probably just a big animal. Nonetheless, there was one that was like 3 skulls together as a mask, and I was like, that's really freaking dope design. Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, and well lit with like some of these underground caverns with the torches and stuff. And there was a lot from a visual standpoint that I could give this movie a lot of credit for, even if a lot of the time the writing and some of the acting as well, because we didn't really touch on the acting much yet. I found both of those lacking, but from a stylistic standpoint, I was not disappointed with this, and it felt worthy of a theatrical release, even if it is only for tonight, and then it's being reshown on Saturday night as well. They're doing an encore showing for people to see.
So everyone is seeing this on Wednesday. So we saw it last night as you're watching this, and there is a new showing this coming Saturday. If you're watching this and you're interested, I agree with Fuego. I think that this is one of the most accomplishedly made wrong turn movies. Now, it's not as gratuitous with the gore as the other wrong turn movies ended up getting. And
I still remember the second one with the cut in half.
Right in half, yeah. I mean, they continue that, but even got more gratuitous as it went on at times. And I, as a gore hound, I love that. But what's funny is there's even a line that they kind of they poke fun at the original series, where someone's like, "Yeah, it's movie night tonight," and someone's like, "What are we watching?" It's like, "Oh, they got some redneck cannibal movie or something like that." And I was like, and he's like, "Again?" And I was like, "Yeah, okay." Because this is technically the 7th wrong turn movie, technically. But one of the other things I have to say that I guess I should have mentioned under story, but I'll mention now, is that this movie came this close to me walking out so pissed with the ending. Like the movie ends and it cuts to the title and you're like, what? And then it like continues as the credits roll, and then the actual ending happens while the credits are rolling. And it was such a weird way to do it, but I was literally like, oh, I'm going to light this movie on fire with how they ended this. And then it continued to go as the credits rolled, which was both A, super weird, but B, ultimately, in retrospect and as it happened, so unique that it was effective for me. I was like, even like the film, it was like almost like a nod, as like the filmmakers are like, yeah, that would have been super unsatisfying, so this is what actually happens. Mm-hmm. That, to me, that was how it hit me. What about you?
Well, there's a double psych out at the end of the movie, actually, because something happens, as they're figuring things out, or at least trying to, and casualties that happen, those left behind, all kinds of things like that, without spoiling. But it's you just. As we've seen so many horror movies at this point that you just know, you're like, something else has to happen here. This movie, I'm just waiting for it. So that's also predictability. And
you did watch through the credits, I'm assuming.
Oh, damn right I did. I stayed until they started the pseudo behind the scenes. That's why when I
I didn't. Okay.
I was like 2 hours and 20 minutes. How the hell can this movie be that long?
Oh, is that because I was out by like 1:53. I left the theater.
Yeah. So after because the shot stuck there, and I kept wondering, are they gonna leave something open?
I thought someone else would stumble out of the car or something like that.
That's what I thought too. And so I stayed until the very end when they showed Constantine films or whatever. And then after that, for this special one-night event, they go into a making of Wrong Turn and behind-the-scenes interviews with the acting team and the directors and all that stuff. And I was intrigued to stick around, but I was like, I know we're trying to get back and review it, and so I did not stick around. I'm sure it'll be on supplemental stuff and once it's on home release. And this is one that I actually think I would rewatch.
Yeah. No, I would too. And it's nice that I think it actually is the very rare case of a reboot that can definitely stand on its own and yet also still definitely fall under that overall Wrong Turn umbrella. Like it's a very rare case where a reboot remake could do that, right? And this I think is one that does it. As we've talked, this is one of those other. It's kind of reverse. I know there have been reviews where we've talked, you've increased your liking for a movie. I think that's been happening for me as we've been talking because. Yeah, I mean, it was just too long for me. That was the only thing. Mm-hmm. It felt like that last 20 minutes. Because here's the thing. Everything that happened in that last 20 minutes could legitimately have happened during the first escape, so to speak, right? They just could have added a couple of more key moments when key people get offed. And then it would have been satisfying instead of dragging it out that extra 20 minutes. But they did what they did, and it is what it is. And while it felt definitely too long for me, it was still a unique enough take on this story in the horror genre that I appreciate it, for sure.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, and that's coming from somebody who doesn't have like a big affinity for this series of films, So, kind of surprising for me. And then when I talk about the burden of expectation all the time on this channel with you, and often when you don't have much of any expectation, I think that worked to my benefit in this case. So
I think so too. I'm glad you opted to take the time to go watch it. We'll get this review up, a little bit quicker than we normally do, so that's good. But it was our job to either warn or appraise people of this movie, and I think we've done our job. So you guys make the determination whether you think it's worth your time. I don't think necessarily you need to risk the theatrical experience for this. Personally, I think it's fine if you do. The visuals are definitely not going to disappoint you in that way, but I don't think it's necessarily in the current state of affairs in the world that you need to risk it. I might be the guy that says Kong vs. Godzilla is worth risking it, but this one, probably VOD in a month is fine. Unless you're a diehard Wrong Turn person.
Yeah, I believe it comes out next month. I was trying to find...
Yeah, February 26th is
what
I thought. Cool. Yeah, literally a month.
Yes, I believe that is correct as I'm looking right now. So
yeah, because February is the... Yeah, it's literally the only month you can say it'll be the same day.
Correct,
So yeah, any final thoughts on the movie, Fuego?
We didn't really talk extensively about the acting, and
you're right.
I didn't really like our main six very much, and our lead girl, she kind of came into her own at the end, and Modine was fine, but there was an interesting they didn't seem as hammy and cheesy this foundation, without getting too into it, especially the leader guy and his daughter, and even the little girl. Like, I've seen films of this kind of cult nature where it's not convincing, and it just seems like schlocky and hammy and whatever. This did feel like there was kind of more of a sense of seriousness and accomplished aspect to most of the acting from them. So, props there is what I would send as a final thought. So.
I would tend to agree with you. It was interesting. The main six weren't bad. No one pulled me out of the movie, but they were the typical analogs for horror movies like this, for sure, even nowadays. With
lots of just screaming at each other.
Yeah, exactly. Manufactured drama before the craziness hits. But nothing that was ruining the movie by any stretch of the imagination. So
no, I wouldn't say that.
So yeah, there you go, guys. That's gonna do it for our review of Wrong Turn 2021, aka Wrong Turn Foundation. What you might say is, if you want to mix the Wrong Turn franchise with M. Night Shyamalan's The Village, that's where you're gonna have the meshing that would probably the most describe this movie.
Well put. Yeah.
So there you go, guys. Let us know in the comments down below if you have any interest to see this. If you did see this, let us know your non-spoilery thoughts in those comments as well. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, click the like button and subscribe. Thank you to all of our patrons for supporting the channel more directly. We greatly appreciate you guys. Until next time, though, I've been Cecil Laird.
And gracias, Jaime and Fuego.
And remember, stay scared.